Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is the Sentinel, watching over geekdom, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. I'm going to be doing something a little different today. Before you ask, my Jamie trilogy is still coming. I am currently on my re-listen of Legend of the Cybermen. As soon as I'm done with that, in the next day or so, hopefully, I will do that review. But in the meantime, I'm going to be doing something different. Today, I will be reviewing the Dark Shadows movies. And yeah, I've been watching Dark Shadows a lot lately, and I really enjoy it. Currently, I'm on episode, I think 103, and since I've been watching, I wanted to do something in regards to Dark Shadows for a while on my channel, and I had a couple of different ideas. I figured this would be the one to go with. So, without any further ado, let's just get right into it. This will be a review / ranking, so I will go from what I consider to be the worst of the movies to the best of the movies. And starting us off, number 3, what I think is the weakest movie, House of Dark Shadows. Oh boy, where do I even want to start here? Well, for one thing, while Dan Curtis was making this movie, Dark Shadows was still going on, so he had to, go between the series and this movie. And I think that created a lot of issues in the production because, at least in terms of editing, this movie is a mess. It feels like scenes cut off so abruptly, and it happens with the music as well. It just cuts so abruptly, and then when the next scene begins, it's always leaving this sense of, boy, it feels like there was more to that. Not like in a symbolic kind of way, but more as it felt unfinished. And these unfinished scenes kept happening, and or what felt like unfinished scenes, I should say, and it ended up making the movie feel really rushed. Also, in terms of introducing people to Dark Shadows, because the original series is 1,200 episodes, and that's a lot of TV, this one is probably the harshest to newcomers, because there's no introduction to it, there's no world building, it just throws you into the movie expecting you to already know everything that's going on. Is there anything else I wanted to go on from there? The performances are all solid. Nothing noteworthy, nothing stand out. Except Grayson Hall is Julia Hoffman, but she's always great, from what I've seen so far. But yeah, no, really most of the problems with this movie are in the production and in the editing. And there's no real time given to... Really, as soon as I'm ready to finish, I think of more stuff. There's no real time given to the characters either, it's just situation happens, everyone reacts. Next situation happens, everyone reacts. There's no sense of build-up. There's no establishing anything. Like I said, there's no character development. Also, if you're unfamiliar with this movie, Jonathan Frid was not happy with the film's depiction of Barnabas because, unlike the series, where Barnabas is a very reluctant vampire, he's more heroic. In House of Dark Shadows, he is the villain. And doing that, and the way this story plays out, this is a very generic vampire story. It actually feels really like a play on Dracula. This is the weakest of the movies. Number 2, and I expect to get a lot of flack for this one, is, for not considering this one the worst. Number 2, Dark Shadows. Also, just to avoid confusion, Tim Burton's Dark Shadows. I have a love-hate relationship with this movie. There are times when I watch it and when I look at it and it's like, okay, this is okay. It's nothing great. It's nothing outstanding, but it's passable. And then there are times when I absolutely hate it. Um, for me, when I saw this, or I think around the second or third time I saw it, this was the movie where I went, okay, Tim Burton should stick to his own original stuff and stop doing adaptations. Which is funny, because now that I think about it, I don't actually think this is the worst of Tim Burton's adaptations. But yeah, and despite my issues with this movie, and I will at least give it this. This is better made than House of Dark Shadows. This is better put together. It's edited better. It's just, in terms of production, it's a better made movie than House of Dark Shadows. Which, like I said, the production values were the biggest problems with House of Dark Shadows. And I also think, if you're new to Dark Shadows, this is a great way to get into it, because while I do have some issues, which I'll get to, this movie feels like a Cliff Notes version. You know, it introduces sort of the general plot, the very, very general plot, the characters, their relationships, and yeah, it gives you a little bit of an idea of what the series is about. It's not perfect. I feel it's too comedic. A little bit of comedy is good every now and then. It's fine here and there, but this movie, a lot of it seems to be, you have this centuries-old vampire in the 60s, 70s, and a lot of the movie seems to be fish-out-of-water jokes. In terms of it as an adaptation, though, I only really have... It's okay, but some are better than others. Like, I think, as far as adapting goes, I think the characters who came out the best, the least unscathed, were Elizabeth and Angelique. But, yeah, as far as the characters go, my two biggest issues with this movie are Maggie and Vicky are made into one character. And I kind of get the idea behind that, because Maggie and Vicky throughout the series were used kind of interchangeably. Like, there's one story arc, I might be mixing up two different story arcs here, please forgive me, where when Vicky went back in time, Maggie was sort of hired to take over as being David's governess. And even in House of Dark Shadows, Maggie was David's governess. There was no mention of Vicky. And in another instance, I'm not sure, I'll have to double check, but I believe in the Revival series, Vicky was Josette's reincarnation, not Maggie. But again, I'm not sure about that. I am in the middle of getting my hands on the Revival series, and I'm planning to do something with that. It's only 13 episodes, so I'm probably going to do an episode-by-episode review. We'll see. But no, but here, in the Tim Burton movie, Maggie and Vicky are fused into one character. And on top of that, the backstory Burton gives her is incredibly weak. It's like, her backstory is given maybe a minute and a half of screen time, and that's not enough to dwell on it, or to build on it, or form any kind of relationship or opinion. And it's just stupid. My other big problem with the Tim Burton movie is how it treats the character of Julia Hoffman. Now, and that's really a shame, because I love Helena Bonham Carter. In high school, she was my celebrity crush. But yeah, no, I would say that along with Barnabas, Quentin, and Angelique, Julia is one of the show's most popular characters. And just the way Burton treated her in the movie, it was just so bad. Like, yikes. That's really all I can say. I mean, in terms of the other adaptations, it's kind of hit and miss. I think Carolyn's kind of tricky to talk about, because she's meant to be younger than in the movie than she was in the series. David's not as psychotic, which is kind of a double-edged sword, because There are times when I like David in the series, and then there are times when it's like, you little bastard, I want to smack you. And I like that the movie David never goes that far, but at the same time, he comes across as too precocious. Roger's a bigger dick in the movie than he is in the series, which is kind of impressive because in the series, he is kind of a massive dick. Oh, this is probably going to be also one of my most colorful videos. But yeah, like I said, ultimately, the end result, in my opinion, is if you're new to Dark Shadows, if you want to get into it, the Burton movie is a great Cliff Notes version. It's a great jumping on point. And I always do this when I do rankings, because there's always one left, so I don't do any build-up or fanfare, so let's just get right to it. Number 1, Night of Dark Shadows. Yeah, this one, still not perfect, but I do think it is miles better than, leagues better than the other two. For one thing, this is a completely original story, and I think Dan Curtis, well, for one, this movie, as far as I remember reading about, I should have double-checked the production notes and read up on what the production was like, but this movie was made around the time or the series was ending or after the series ended. So, which means Dan Curtis could focus more on this movie, whereas House of Dark Shadows, he had to keep switching between the series and the movie. And this movie also tells an original story. It's not adapting any of the storylines from the series. I've heard that it's a very, very loose adaptation of the parallel time story arc, but I'm not going to vouch for that. Like I said, I'm on episode 103. I'm not even near the parallel time story arc. But because this is an original story, the movie actually sets time aside to establish its world building. It gives time. It gives time to its mythos. It gives time to establish its characters. I'm trying to think where else to go. You could argue that this is a sequel to House of Dark Shadows, partially because it's marketed that way, and partially because, by the end of House of Dark Shadows, spoiler, even though the movie's decades old, most of the Collins family is dead. And at the beginning of Night of Dark Shadows, Quentin is inheriting Collinwood, and the maid, Carlotta, I'll talk about her in a second, and they establish that Quentin is inheriting Collinwood after Elizabeth has died. I mean, you could argue that Night of Dark Shadows is a loose sequel to House of Dark Shadows, but I'm going for it's set in another parallel timeline. I like this movie a little bit more because it's a witch movie. I can't speak for the horror genre, but when it comes to fantasy, I like witch movies. Thank you, Hocus Pocus. And it still does have some problems. Like, one of my big issues with this movie in particular is that, like I said, I'm not that far in the series, but I have started listening to some of the audio dramas from Big Finish. And from what I've listened to so far, and what I've seen on YouTube, because when I'm curious, I look up stuff on YouTube, I read wikis, etc., etc. One of my favorite characters in Dark Shadows is Angelique. And despite the fact that she is set up as the main antagonist in this movie, or one of the main antagonists, the other one being Quentin's ancestor, I want to say his name was Jeremiah or Josiah. I don't remember, and I don't want to get it wrong. But yeah, despite Angelique being the main antagonist of this movie, she's barely in it. And that's kind of costs points with me, because like I said, I like Angelique. And really, unlike the Tim Burton movie and House of Dark Shadows, Night of Dark Shadows is a very slow burn kind of movie. And more often than not, there were some moments where I felt the movie dragged a little bit. I'm trying to think where I was going with that point. Because I don't have a segue or anything. But also, we get a new character in this movie. Even though, again, alternate timeline. So you could argue that every character is new. But, like, we have David Collins. We have Amy Jennings. We have Angelique. And then we get a new character in this movie named Carlotta. Played once again by Grayson Hall. Which, works because as we travel through time in the series, as we traveled through time and met various characters, the actors would still play them. Like, for example, Louis Edmonds, who played Roger, he, when the show traveled back in time, played Barnabas's father. I want to say Jeremiah, but I don't think that's right. And having Grayson Hall, who played Julia, play Carlotta, it keeps that tradition sort of going. Also, Carlotta is the best part of this movie. And I got nothing else to say. I do have one more thing to say. If you're new to Dark Shadows and you want to check out some of the stuff and jump into the series, Night of Dark Shadows is a great starting point because, like I said, it tells an original story, so you don't need anything from the series to jump into it. You could just jump right in and watch this movie in isolation and kind of not really get an idea of the series, of what goes on in the series, but kind of get an idea what it's like in terms of tone and storytelling and such. And I've got no conclusion because I'm not ranking these, so I will just skip ahead to the end. So that was my fun little quick review and ranking of the Dark Shadows movies. What did you think? What were your opinions? What were your thoughts? Start a conversation in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, and then click the little bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. In the description box below, you will find the link to my Twitter where you can keep updates, where you can get updated on me and the channel. And also, this is something I just started, in the link in the link in the description below, I have started a Ko-fi. So, if you're feeling generous, you can support me and the channel. And yeah, you can support me in the channel. I wish I had a better spiel for this, but I just started it. And help the channel to improve and grow. So, this is the Sentinel, watching over Geekdom, and I'll see you guys next time.